Welcome everybody to the Digital Services Forum weekly meeting. Today we're going to have Brad come in and talk to us about a perspective on the need for a ServiceNow operating model. I think he's still struggling to get in, but he should be here in a minute.
Apologies, John. I was forced to register
Okay.
for the session.
Good deal. I'll just get it kicked off and then hand it off to you.
Sounds good.
We start off, we have a very active chat, and we go back and look at the chat and make sure that we get all the messages in. And a lot of the way that we developed the content for future meetings is we go ahead and look at the chat and see what everybody's talking about or where we might be missing content. So if you have any ideas along the way, go ahead and drop them in there. And if today's your first time, especially, make sure you let everybody know who you are and where you're from and what you're coming for, so that we can get you involved in the conversation. So today our speaker is going to be Brad. He's our senior executive enterprise architect. We work together pretty frequently, so it's great to have Brad speaking for his first time. And he's going to go through a couple different topics on governance. And then at the end, I think you're going to hand it to me for the last few minutes, and we'll just touch on some future sessions. So without further ado, Brad, I'll hand it right off to you, and you can get us kicked off on governance.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, John. And good morning, everybody. Okay, so popular topic these days is the operating model, recommended operating models for ServiceNow and governance in the platform. For those who have been around as long as John and I have in the platform, this is a topic that didn't exist, 10 plus years ago. But really over the past few years, this is something we've really put a lot of energy into and refined the message. And it's really important in how we manage the platform. So I'm going to go through this, and I do want to keep this as an open forum. If anybody does have questions as we're going through, please feel free. John, what's the best format? Is to put them in the chat, and then you can help call them out, or do we want people raising their hands or just being interactive? How do you typically run them?
Yeah, just go ahead and drop them in the chat, and then if there is something more complex, I'll ask them to come off mute and jump in as well.
Terrific. So feel free, guys, add them in the chat. John's able to keep an eye on that as I'm going through this, and we can pause and pivot and have all sorts of conversations, because I do enjoy this to be a lively conversation. I know it's governance. How lively can it be? But I'm going to present a lot of information, and I do want to get some thoughts and feedback from you if you have questions on any of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. So let's have some fun with this. So I want to start with a bit of an analogy. And my analogy that I love to talk to is NASA. So if we look at, the late 1950s to the, say, early 2000s, if you wanted to get a payload into space, there was one game in town. It was NASA. That was the way to do it. But as we look to the year 2000 and beyond, new entrants entered the field, right? SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin. These were all new companies that developed their own shuttle tech or spacecraft technologies to deliver payloads into space. But the one thing they had in common was they still relied on NASA to be the enabler to help them get what they needed to do in orbit. So this is the analogy that I really want us to think about as we go through all this material. Our platform support team is the NASA, right? They may have been the original team managing our ServiceNow environment, but as our needs for the platform grow, their role changes to be this enabler for more like a modern day NASA as opposed to a legacy NASA. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the material. Okay. So I want to talk about 8 reasons why some customers aren't as successful as others. So, our team here at ServiceNow, we've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of customers over the years, and we've seen the good, we've seen the bad, we've seen the ugly, and that's really where a lot of this input comes from. But it's important to highlight, where customers fall down so that we understand what do we need to do in order to be successful. So the first thing is, missing any defining KPIs or measuring outcomes with the work that we're putting into the platform, right? If we're moving workload into the platform, let's make sure that we are doing something to measure it. How do we know we were successful if we don't know what good looks like? And how do we make sure that we're improving if we're not measuring in the first place? So anytime we're moving workload into the platform, let's make sure we're doing something to measure it. Preferably also make sure we're measuring the value that we're bringing. But as long as we're measuring outcomes, we can always derive that value as well. Missing platform governance or missing federated development. So this is relying solely on that platform team for everything, right? A lot of our customers, they started off using ITSM in the platform. And so what did they do? Well, they had their remedy team, their BMC team, and they said, hey, you know what? You're now going to manage this ServiceNow thing. And so basically what you did is you took an application support team and you gave them a platform to manage. Problem with that is we're not an application, we are a platform. And so as the scope in your organization starts to grow beyond ITSM, you're now asking a singular application support team to start to manage more than they're capable of. They can't scale. So we cannot have the platform team accountable for everything. And we're going to talk more about the concepts of behind how we make federated development happen. That's going to be a big thing for us to key in on. Okay. No documented vision or strategic roadmap for the platform. Again, this is a byproduct of, coming in as an ITSM tool in a lot of organizations. We become a tactical ticketing system in the vision of a lot of senior people within an organization. And these are some of the things that we need to change. And one is, what is the North Star for the platform? What is ServiceNow's purpose in your organization? Let's document that. Let's make sure that everybody understands, where does service, like what is the purpose for the platform? And make sure we have a bit of a roadmap to help align the capabilities of the platform to how we are enabling strategic outcomes within your organization. Now, one of the things that's going to help us do that is engaging senior leadership. So again, this is another thing where we see organizations struggle is when they don't have senior leadership involved as part of the governance process. And that also plays a role in they're not going to have that vision and they're not going to have that roadmap because these are things where we do need that senior leader to be involved to help us create in the first place. Trying to go it alone without a partner or internal experience. So I often talk about, internal experience, and I love to differentiate between experience and tenure. In my mind, two very different things. I've worked with one customer. They've been on the platform for a good decade or so. But because they've been on the platform for so long, there's a ton of technical debt. It doesn't even look like what ServiceNow is supposed to look like anymore. They've customized it so much. So when you get people in that organization that say, yeah, I've worked with ServiceNow for 6 years, it's 6 years on a highly customized environment, doesn't resemble the platform. So that's not really valid experience. That's just 6 years of tenure. And that's not the same value. So when you're bringing in people to grow your team, make sure that the experience is valuable. But when I talk about trying to go it all alone, we want to make sure that as you're looking to turn on new capabilities in the platform, right? Especially when you're looking for, standing up new products. So let's say you're turning on risk for the first time or SecOps, make sure that you've leveraged preferably a partner. They've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. It's so much easier for them to do this effectively and efficiently. They'll get you done in, potentially 2-3 months, whereas your internal team would take 10 or 11 months. There's massive cost savings. Even if a lot of organizations get hung up on, well, the partners, their hourly rates are high and this, that, and the other. But the reality is that you're going to take so much longer to do it internally. It's going to cost you 4 times as much anyway. So leverage those partners, leverage people with experience, get you up and running. You can always do the knowledge transfer to your internal team if you're going to sustain the platform internally. No problem with that at all. It's just the getting up and running, leverage some experience to help with that. Platform team not staffed correctly according to best practices. So hopefully everyone on this call knows, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you right now, we do have what we call our platform team size estimator. It's available on our public-facing website. It'll ask you a bunch of questions, some variables that are unique to your organization. You can sort of enter in those parameters, and it'll spit out a report telling you, based on the data that you gave us, here are the roles that here are the number of FTE you should have in which particular roles. There is going to be a bit of a range because it's not a perfect science, but at least it's going to give you a guideline on what is the ideal team size for your organization based on the information you shared with us. Okay. More often than not, when people go to that team size estimator, their eyes pop out of their heads because the number they see is so big. But the reality is that we are a strategic platform for the majority of our customers. And we do need to make sure that we're staffing ourselves accordingly if we want to get the maximum value out of the platform for your business. Okay. Not staying out of the box and incurring technical debt through too many customizations. This is a big challenge for, I know for older customers, I think it's, newer customers have an easier time grasping this concept. But, the wonderful thing about this platform is we can do so much with it. That can sometimes also be a bit of a curse if we're not doing it properly, right? So, sorry, was there a question?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. To quote Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility, right? So we need to, yes, we need to understand that there's a lot we can do with the platform, but we need to know the wherewithal to understand where it's appropriate to do certain things. And one thing that I will throw out there is a lot of organizations tend to, when they engage their business says, yeah, I want to do this in the platform and I'm going to operate it the way I operated it before, but just move it into ServiceNow. And you know what? That's not really digital transformation. That's just digital migration, right? So the whole point of our platform is we are going to transform the how. The outcomes your business will dictate. Those outcomes don't change. How we get to those outcomes will change. That's part of the transformation journey. And we're going to do that by staying out of the box as much as we can. We pour a lot of money in research and development in our platform every year. This is to make sure that we are doing the best way to accomplish these goals for the products that we've got in the market. Okay. And lastly, assuming you can have a world-class CMDB without using discovery and service mapping. The big piece here is I want to focus on, it's all about automation, right? We talk about our agentless discovery and service mapping. These are just automated ways to get data into the CMDB and understand the relationships between the CIs and your services. Automation, automation, automation. Let's make sure that we do not have any manual loads into our CMDB. They're going to be fraught with errors or challenges, making sure that we're able to maintain this accurately over time. So why is this important? Governance will ensure we have alignment and focus to ensure we are working on the right things that matter. We're going to end up with standards that are going to be backed by policies on how we are using the technology. We're going to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities for all the stakeholders involved in the platform. And this is also going to include standards regarding our data. And lastly, we'll have an understanding of the value we are getting for the platform and understand, are we aligned to our goals? So how do I tell if I'm set up for success, right? We got to ask ourselves, are these things in place, right? Capability roadmap. Are we continually increasing the value of the platform? And our operating model, is it working? Engaged leadership. Do we have an executive or a C-level champion? Are they setting our direction? Right? Have we defined all of our services that we're going to be managing in the platform? Certified resources. I'm going to drill into this one for a little bit because this is a massive opportunity that I find a lot of customers tend to overlook. It's not enough to just train your teams, but we do need to make sure you certify them as well. The results are going to be astonishing. And here's my story on this. You train your staff, they're going to be trained, and they'll go on their merry way, and there's no incentive to continue with education on that subject matter. Getting a certification in a certain part of the platform requires you to maintain that certification. And hopefully there's a good number of folks on the call that understand what I'm talking about. You've been certified at something in the platform, right? But for those who aren't, right, the certification process, you have to write a Delta exam every other release to maintain your certifications. And here's why it's important. If this maintenance did not exist, then I would be a certified implementation specialist on the Berlin release of ServiceNow. I think we can all agree that between Berlin and Washington, there have been a lot of innovations that have come out in those 20 odd releases, right? Keeping the certifications and maintaining the certifications mean I have to review the release notes for every one of those Delta exams I have to write, forcing me to be familiar with all the new capabilities that come out. And this is going to be massively beneficial to your organization, especially when I start talking about some of the roles and responsibilities, and we talk about the concept of the solution-specific architects that we want to have within your teams. Okay. And lastly, distributed development. This is really the only way to scale the platform, right? We want to make sure that we've got teams that understand the business requirements, front-facing to those parts of the business, speaking their language and understanding the requirements, and then translating them into out-of-the-box capabilities on the platform. Okay. So if we do this right, what's the end result? We're going to have better visibility on what's happening in the environment, all of it, even if you've grown 5 times as large. There will be no more finger pointing or gray areas in your process. You'll have improved funding models. You'll get better leverage of the technology and capabilities that you have. And you're going to have overarching service improvement capabilities that are going to work. Okay. So that's just sort of the backdrop of why is this important. So hopefully, some of the things I talked about have resonated on, yeah, you know what, that makes sense. This is important. Now I'm going to start going into the 3 main areas that we need to focus on as we look to stand up governance within our organization. So the first thing we need to talk about are roles and responsibilities. Okay. So we have 15 critical roles on the ServiceNow platform support team. Now, a lot of people see this and they kind of gag. They're like, that's a lot of people. I don't have that many people. What are you talking about? So consider the roles like hats, okay? Somebody can wear more than one hat. That's okay. I'm not going to go through all 15 of these roles, but I am going to talk a little bit about the ones I've highlighted in green, because these ones, in my opinion, are some of the most critical roles as we talk about governance, okay? So our executive sponsor, that's obviously a very critical role. We do need an executive champion. This is a person who is helping to set the vision for the platform, setting our North Star, working with our team to understand what is the roadmap for the platform, right? What do we want to accomplish over the next 12 to 18 months? And how do those things align with our corporate strategy, right? At the end of the day, we are a platform that enables us to deliver on our strategy. Let's make sure we have that alignment at an executive level. They are also going to be the chair of our strategic governance board, which I'll get into in the next section more. But that's a key role dealing with executives' peers in the organization as well. Okay. The platform administrator is another very important role. This is going to be a person who is going to be setting some of the overall technical direction for the platform, working to understand what are the standards that we need to have in place platform-wide, and working with our other teams that are going to be working in the platform and building in the platform to ensure they're adhering with those standards, right? And they're going to play a key role to making sure that it all ties together. And working with our enterprise architecture team. Oh, sorry, I just realized I highlighted the wrong one. I apologize. I'm talking about platform architect, not platform administrator. But I realized when I highlighted these the other day, I highlighted the wrong one. I apologize for that. So it is the platform architect that I'm talking about here. That's the key person. I just saw the A. I must have just, my brain filled in the rest. But because they're our platform architect, they're also going to liaise with our enterprise architecture team, if we have one, to make sure that anything we're doing in the platform from a standards perspective aligns with the rest of the organization's enterprise architecture standards. Okay. Number 11 on this slide, it says data manager. When I go through my full set of materials, I sometimes call this the data steward or the CMDB manager, right? At the end of the day, this is the person accountable for the data that is in the CMDB and making sure that it's up to date, it's being handled correctly, helping set some of the standards around the data as well. And this is a person where, I talked about the concept of hats before. This is a solo hat. This is a very critical role. It needs to be one person wearing this hat. or at least one person, maybe they're leading a team, but it rolls up to one person. This is not something that someone does on the side of their desk. This is not a shared job that they can share with, you can share with other responsibilities. The CMDB is going to be the lifeblood of your environment. We need somebody making sure that all the data coming in is coming in cleanly. If I have issues with my discovery schedules, then this person will delegate the work to the appropriate owner of the source data to figure out what's going on, right? It is not incumbent upon them to solve all the problems. It is incumbent on them to identify the problems and farm them out to the relevant people around the organization to do the work, right? So if the distribution of work is what is really critical here, so it's not on this person, but they're going to be checking things like your CMDB health dashboard, make sure that, you know, my stale CIs are taken care of, my orphan CIs and my duplicate CIs are all at a reasonable level, and continue to monitor and manage those going forward.
Okay, Brad?
Yep.
There's a question on here. Do you see the platform architect and enterprise architect the same role or separate?
It's a great question. I think I see them as separate, because the platform architect's going to have a lot to cover within the platform. I know I was talking with a platform architect the other day, and I was having, you know, I was talking governance with their team. And right now, that platform architect is actually involved with all the different delivery pods within this organization, reviewing all of their requirements. And he's actually a bottleneck to their process today, right? So if he was doing an enterprise architecture function as well, that would only make that worse. So the platform architect is going to be busy enough just dealing with the platform. I don't think it should be a shared function with the enterprise architecture. Okay. Great question.
Usually the enterprise architect has a broader scope too. Like they might be looking
Absolutely.
at several platforms, right, instead of one. I think that's
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great point, John. Yeah.
Thanks, Brad.
All right. The next role I want to talk about is and I did it again. I highlighted the wrong one. Wow, I must have been in a rush. Number 14, the solution specific architect. That's the role that I wanted to talk about here. And guys, we'll clean this up before we share this out with everybody else. So John, don't share this until I update this for you. So the solution specific architect is the fourth key role that I want to talk about. And this is going back to my conversation around the certifications. The solution specific architect is ideally what you're going to have as you start branching out and the scope of what you're doing in the platform increases. You know, you've moved beyond ITSM. You're now dealing with, you know, customer service management, HR service delivery, integrated risk management. Well, you're now going to start to work on some product teams that are going to help manage those products, but you also want to have a solution specific architect front facing each of the business units that is interacting with those products. And here's what they're going to do. The solution specific architect is going to be trained and certified on the particular products that they are responsible for. So if it's HRSD, they will preferably be an implementation specialist for HRSD. And what this is going to give you is going to make sure that that role has intimate knowledge of that product, HRSD, and what all the out-of-the-box capabilities are, so that when HR comes to you with their requirements, you now have somebody who says, okay, yeah, I understand your business. Here's your requirements. Here's the out-of-the-box capabilities that are going to give you the outcomes that you're looking for. When you don't have this role in place, here's what happens. We all have a lot of smart developers in our organizations. I am not going to question that for a minute. But what the smart developers don't have is the insight on how we leverage some of the out-of-the-box capability. If they don't know it's there and they're not aware of it, what are they going to do? They're going to script a way to make the requirement happen in the platform. And guess what? Now you've built technical debt and you built some customized capability. You have to maintain that. Guess what? It's also not going to talk with all the other parts of the platform that it was originally designed for. So this is the value the solution specific architect is going to really bring to the team, is ensuring that we're staying as out of the box as possible, minimizing our technical debt, and giving the capabilities that align with the business requirements of our business stakeholders. Okay. So that's quickly a little bit about some of the key roles. There are some extended roles as well, which I don't know that I have time to cover today. But we also talk about 10 roles outside of the core platform support team. And again, these are just from people from enterprise architecture to information security. They're not part of our base umbrella team, but they are part of the greater community, and we need to involve them in our process, right? They're going to be stakeholders, especially when we talk about security, right? We don't want to bring security in at the 11th hour to a conversation about discovery, right? I've seen this so many times where nobody talks to security. We're about to implement discovery, and then all of a sudden security gets wind of it, and they're like, "Oh, hold on a second, you're asking for a lot of access on these servers." But we bring them in at the very beginning of the conversation, make it clear so they understand what we're actually doing with agentless discovery, what processes are running, what are we doing with those IDs, that's read only, like all these things helps pave the way so that we can get things done faster. Okay. All right. So when we look at operating models on the platform, right, we've got basically 3 different options available, right? And this is self-explanatory, right? You do a distributed model, which would be great because we're going to have, a team aligned with, each of the products that we have. We'll have our own backlogs, our own prioritization. Great, no problem. The problem is going to be is how do we ensure that they're consistent in how they're dealing with things like data, with things like integrations? That's a challenge. On the flip side, a centralized model, that's no problem. It's one team. We know they're going to follow the same standards. They're going to deal with integrations and data the same way. Problem is, there's no way that this centralized team can scale to meet the needs of our organization as we expand beyond 1 or 2 products. So the whole concept between our recommendations is really talking about a hybrid model. And how do we get the best of both the distributed and the centralized model in this hybrid mode? That's the magic behind what we put together as part of this talk track. Okay. I do want to highlight that this is a bit of a maturity model, right? This is not there's one model, implement this and you're done. No, this is all going to depend on your maturity in the platform, how many products are you leveraging, and also just the type of organization that you are. Are you a local organization, a national organization, or an international global organization, right? So we do have a bit of a maturity model that we can go through as we work through this material. I believe for today, the purpose of today's conversation, I'm going to focus on initial governance and the maturing governance. I find getting into the complex organizations is truly for a very small subset of organizations that I often don't interact with as far as the customers that I engage with. But we can always have conversations if you are one of those. We can talk about that separately. But I feel that the majority of customers can do just fine with the first 2 options here. Okay. So as we're just starting out with governance, what do we want to look at? And we really just want to set up our 3 initial governance boards, right? We want again, going back to some of those initial slides I showed you, clarification on the decision-making processes, understanding who's responsible for what, and giving some roles and accountability to those roles so people understand what is required of them. So when we look at our strategy governance board, right, this is going to make sure that we understand what are all the corporate initiatives happening in our organization. How does ServiceNow fit into that picture, right? They're going to create the roadmap, the funding model, and key measures of value that are going to be important to us as we implement work into the platform, right? We're going to have business unit leadership from all of our business units as part of this governance board. So again, everybody in the organization is going to understand what's the relevance of ServiceNow and how is it helping us as an organization, not just helping us as IT, okay? Because this is going to help as well with enabler for enterprise service management, again, across all of our businesses. Our technical governance board, ultimately they are going to morph into really focused on the stability of the platform but when we're starting out, their mandate's going to be a little bigger. They are going to do some development as a starting point. But again, you're going to see how this changes as we start to scale and mature on the platform. But for now, the initial stage, yes, it is going to be somewhat a singular team. They're also going to make sure that we're going to put in policies to handle things like how we manage our instances. How do we promote our update sets? How do we handle data? How do we manage patches and city releases? Okay. And then lastly is the concept of our portfolio governance board. And this is going to be the area where we are going to manage demand and intake to any requirements or requests for work to be done in the platform, right? We're going to put together some formality on assessing business value so that we can properly prioritize based on quantifiable data as best as we can, right? Cost, effort, value, risk, those sorts of things. And giving us, a bit of an overall perspective for prioritization at an enterprise level. When we talk about these governance boards, right, just to give you an idea of who the roles are that should be part of each of the governance boards. So really important to note, our strategy governance board, our executive sponsor, they are the chair. Our CIO or CTO should be part of this board as well. When I say business partners, these are our business leaders from around the organization, so potentially other executives as well. So again, we're going to understand from an executive perspective, how is ServiceNow helping your part of the organization? Our platform owner, platform architect are part of this board. Enterprise architecture should be sitting in here as well. And then service owners, again, we've got business partners, but also service owners, because we may have another dimension in the organization where we need to bring in some leadership from service ownership side of things. Okay. The technical governance board, this should be pretty straightforward. Everybody understands, what roles are part of our core platform team. They're all in here. Our portfolio governance demand board, again, we are going to put a demand manager in place to chair this board with the help from our platform team, the platform owner and platform architect. And our solution-specific architect is part of this as well, because they're going to play a big role as requirements come in. How are we aligning that to out-of-the-box capability, right? Big piece to that puzzle, right? Our IT process owners, our service owners, program managers, they're all part in here as well, because they're going to understand what work needs to be done this year for different parts of the organization. I talked about setting up some policies. These are 8 that you can start with, right? And you can see which policies are going to align with which governance board, and they all sort of have their importance, right? So, when we talk about strategy governance, right, let's talk about a customer journey roadmap policy. Like this, it's so important to create and maintain this roadmap that it is recommended to create a policy on this, right? I'm sure everybody can appreciate every year your strategic imperatives for the organization change, right? Our C-suite is always every year, they've got new direction, new strategies. Let's make sure that our roadmap aligns with that year after year as those priorities change, right? Technical governance, right? Some of the big key things here is the platform data governance policy, right? Understanding how are we going to manage and standardize the data? How are we synchronizing data, right? How are we using the identification and reconciliation engine? If we have multiple sources for duplicate data, who's going to win? How do we set that up? And the development policy. This is an important one too, right? Configuration versus customization policies, right? We talk about technical debt and the need to minimize technical debt. Let's make sure we have a policy in place, because there's going to be the time where someone's going to say, you know what, we need to make this customization. We have no alternative. That's fine. That's okay. But let's have a policy on how we're going to manage that, how we're going to maintain visibility for that. So that way we can see, okay, you know what, we went and we updated to Xanadu. Now I see this in my skip log. Can I pull it out? Can I get that tech debt out of here because Xanadu had that capability that I had to customize for, right? So making sure that we have a way to manage that and not just lose sight of these customizations.
Hey, Brett, when you talked about service owners, there's some confusion. So you wouldn't invite every service owner to the demand board, only the service owners that own the ServiceNow services that are being delivered, right? Is that what
Yeah, so service owners that are requesting and requiring capability to be turned on and enabled in ServiceNow. So I'm not just inviting every service owner in the organization. No. It's a service owner who has a requirement for ServiceNow work.
Is that also part of the strategy governance board? That was the one I was asking about, having service owners in the strategy governance board. That could end up being a very large number, making that strategy discussion unwieldy.
Yeah, you know what? Great question, Jeff. And I think at some point, when we look at the audience in the strategy governance board, right? It's our executive sponsor, it's our CIO and CTO. When I say business partners, these are executives within our business units Same from a service owner perspective, we'll bubble that up to a certain executive level where we're not going to have as many, and then it becomes more appropriate for their participation in the governance board.
So you're looking for representation, appropriate, representation for the area, not, okay, got it.
Correct. Okay. But great question, and I'm glad you asked that, because it's a good thing for us to clarify. Okay. So that was sort of, level one as you're getting started. Now I'm going to talk about where do we go from here and take it to the next level, right? So when we start to mature, we start to get more products into the platform. We start to expand outside of IT. We need to expand that original governance model. And so we're going to start to talk about the 5 COEI pillars, so Center of Excellence and Innovation pillars, that we're going to move into. And you're going to see some of the changes that we're going to make. It's important as we do all of these exercises, and the same for the initial governance, right? Let's make sure that we are tying names to each of the roles that we've identified that are going to be participating in these governance boards. That way people understand what is expected of them. And this is the whole clarification of roles and responsibilities, and make sure they understand what are the activities that are required of them. Okay.
Hey, Brad, I'm going to interrupt you here 1 minute. Hey,
Yeah.
Alan, would you mind coming off mute and asking your question?
Hey, John. Thanks. Technical debt is really important, and we've all become aware of it. But as far as I can tell, there really hasn't. I haven't seen anything yet about defining and managing it quantitatively. We say, oh, that's going to incur technical debt, or that's too much technical debt, or that's a little customization, or a lot of customization. Is there any work to take that forward so that we actually have some harder numbers that we could manage? In pure financial debt, those numbers are very well known, and you work on debt, you retire debt, there's the cost of maintaining the debt. It'd be really helpful if we could move forward from qualitatively working with technical debt. Is there any work around there?
That's a great question, Alan. I have not seen anything. I know we often talk about it as, what you're going to have to live with it. And there's going to be a cost to it. And I think it can vary so much from organization to organization, depending on what does that technical debt actually look like. So to quantify an average, it might be challenging. I mean, it's an intriguing proposition, because yes, I mean, if we could present some data, say on average, this is how much technical debt is costing you, and this is what help to justify avoiding it. It's a great conversation to have. I'm just not sure if anybody has really done that level of analysis on it. We can look into it and see if there is anything out there and share it with the group.
There's a lot in the product management area that comes with that, because the product manager is first and foremost made financially responsible for their areas. So that, I think that specifically gets more into that. If you're managing 5 different solutions that do address normalization, you're probably going to be looking to get that down to 1, because you're responsible for the cost of it all, right?
Right. Yeah, for better for worse, we know that once you can express things in 2 decimal points, you get more attention from executives, as opposed to just principles.
No, for sure.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so the top row, you'll see our original 3 governance boards, right? You'll notice some of the changes that we've made as we start to mature the platform, right? As you start to get more products in the platform, that technical governance board cannot exist as a singular team anymore. And this happens very quickly in a lot of organizations, where we need to split out our platform team from our delivery team. And this becomes a change that will help you to scale infinitely. So We want to make sure that we just understand platform team. Think of them like any of your cloud teams, right? You've Azure, AWS, right? What's their sole purpose? Make sure the cloud environment is stable, patched, and available to be developed on. And then that's where our delivery teams come in. They're going to come and do the development work on the platform, following the standards that have been set by the platform team. Okay. On our portfolio governance side, right, this is where the portfolio demand management, that stays the same. The difference here is we've created this innovation board, which is really looking at how do we leverage the latest and greatest technologies and capabilities, which are the things that we should invest our time and dollars into that are going to receive a positive ROI in the organization and really show us value. And when I show you, the roles and who is involved, the innovation one is different than, our platform and delivery teams. There's some significant overlap with some of the key platform team roles. Difference being more the developers, obviously sitting only in the delivery team side. But the innovation board, you'll notice it looks a lot like our strategy governance board, right? Our executive sponsor chairs it, our CIO and CTO are there. The reason why is because we need them to be the ones making the decision on where do we want to invest our innovation dollars, our R&D dollars, on really pushing the edge of the capability and the newest capability in the platform. Okay. So when we put it all together, right, we do have our dedicated ServiceNow team rolling up to our executive sponsor and platform owner. Our Center of Excellence and Innovation has the platform team and the delivery team. Now, I will throw this caveat out there. The delivery team, while yes, it could be part of the broader COEI, they can also exist as a team that is not rolling up to that executive sponsor and operate in a matrixed environment. That is ultimately going to be up to your organization, but they do have a very tight coupled relationship with the platform team because they do form the Center of Excellence and Innovation. Okay. And then our cross-functional governance boards pulling in people from all different parts of the organization to participate in these various boards where they are required. Okay. I'm going to move quickly into demand management. Obviously, this is an important concept, and just trying to, where did my mouse go? I want to move this bar so I can see my slides again. And I'm just realizing that there's one slide I didn't include in here. So I'll talk to it instead. So we want to make sure demand management is going to be very important. We want to make sure that any request for work in the platform, we want visibility into it. That is going to be critical. With the visibility is going to allow us to be able to plan and allocate resources. It's going to make sure that we're able to maintain the velocity that we need to meet up with our commitments. But also, again, if we need to staff up or staff down because we know there's 3 major projects that are happening 4 months from now, okay, well, let's take some measures to leverage a partner to extend my delivery capability or something to deal with that anomaly in my future workload. As far as putting a intake practice into place, right, let's keep it simple. We do want to make sure that people are leveraging the process that we are using. So if we're going to create a demand intake form, let's keep it to a minimum number of fields to start the process. I presented this topic with a customer last week, and when they did this, they had some underlying processes that were a little more detailed that they got into with the stakeholder after the initial demand request had been submitted. So keep it simple so that we can promote adoption. Let's make sure value is always part of the conversation, right? What is the value that this change is going to bring to the organization so that we can justify doing the work, and then we can also measure the value that this brings to the organization after it's been implemented. Okay. Important piece about demand management, and again, one of the benefits of doing this on platform is the ability to visualize with 3 dimensions. So, in our demand workspace, we can take our 3 different dimensions that we're recording. I think, size, value, and risk are the 3 that we key in on. You can change those. You can measure what you want. But those are the ones we're looking at. And ultimately what it comes down to is, you're going to have limited number of people submitting your demand. This is a key concept we want to also enforce is the demands can only be submitted by certain people. These are going to be representatives from your stakeholders, the platform team. Those are some of the key areas that we want to restrict submitting demands to. If we want to open this concept up to the broader organization, that's fine. We can do that as part of ideation, and we can stand up an idea portal where every employee in the organization can submit an idea. They can get upvoted, downvoted, and then the most popular ideas can then be converted into a demand as part of our demand process. Okay. Our demand manager is going to make sure, I'm going to go back here for a second. Our demand manager is going to make sure that the demand has been filled in correctly. And then once they're satisfied, then we can actually set the demand to screening for our stakeholders who we will identify based on the demand to assess the demand. So this is going to be a combination of platform people and stakeholders who are going to assess the value of the demand, which we will then use for the ultimate prioritization within the backlog that we are working with. And so again, as we start to build out more product teams, we'll potentially have a demand board for each of those products so that we can prioritize independently of each other. So we don't have financial services operations competing with IT service management on when they get to go. And I say that because that's a real conversation I had a couple of weeks ago. I had the business user saying, I don't want to wait for ITSM to be deployed in 6 months before I can get my financial services disputes management in place. I need it next month. So let's separate the backlogs between these teams, between these products, so that we can ensure the prioritization is relevant for the business. Okay. So I'm just going to take a minute now to wrap this all back up. This is sort of where we ultimately sit, right? The hybrid delivery model. We have a dedicated delivery team for each of the products that we are working with. In this case, we sort of bundled IT operations together with ITSM and ITOM. Again, once your ITOM deployment gets a certain size, maybe you want to separate that so you can have event management separate from ITSM. But again, our COEI is interacting with all of our development teams as they are working on their own backlogs for their own products. As a one-pager, another way to sort of summarize this, again, you see our product teams, and we have the various roles within those product teams, right? They're all going to be interacting with the demand board. They're going to be interacting with the technical governance board, right? Understanding what kind of solution is being proposed. And then our center of excellence, our platform support team up at the top, understanding how do we interact with the executive steering board as well. Right. So this gives us sort of an overview of how it all ultimately fits together. And the last thing I just want to say, we talked about our NASA analogy at the beginning. I'm going to throw in another analogy at the end here, right? So we have a carpenter who's building a shed. They're going to build it soup to nuts, right? One person job. Now we're starting to build or remodel a house. Well, the carpenter's still going to do the carpentry, but they're going to be managing some people, right? They're going to bring in a mason to pour the concrete foundation. They're going to bring in an electrician, plumbers, right? Figuring out scheduling, when do everybody need to come in. So there's a little bit of a hybrid role here. But, when we sort of take that to the next step, and now we're being asked to build an office building, well, that carpenter's not doing any of the work anymore. They are now, acting as a contractor and coordinating all the work efforts for all of the different trades that are part of the process. So this is ultimately where we need to get to, right? Much like NASA is the coordinator, right? Now you are that mature carpenter who is acting as the contractor. We're playing traffic cop, right? We are making sure that people are following standards, they're building to code, they're not violating any laws, right? And everything gets built within with synergies with each other. So that's the ultimate goal. And when we do this and we do this right, this is how we can scale. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day, is how do we have the right processes in place, the right controls in place that are going to allow us to get work done, but also allow us to scale as demands for workload in the platform continue to increase. So this was just a short version of what's normally a much bigger deck, a lot more content. But happy to share all of that with you at another time if needed. But hopefully this was of value to everybody on the call today. So thank you for giving me the time.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, we offer this as part of the EA engagements that we do too, to come in and make this more yours. Any other questions before? All right, I'm going to grab and share a few slides just to wrap us up here. There was a question on the forum about the let me go back to this one, where all this content is at the end, and I'm just going to flash that up real quick so that I can give everybody a reminder. So with the stuff that Brad just presented, if you go on Monday or usually I have it up within the next day or so, but if you go on to the forum and you go under blog, all of the meetings are on the blog 2 days afterwards. So if you go on the foundational data one we did back on June 6th and you click on that, you'll have access to the recording on that link, and then you'll also have access to any of the content that was shared. So the content is either up here in a link if it's big, and down here as attachments if it's small enough to where I can attach it in the community blog. So just if you wanted to link that blog link, that's a good one to have. I'm going to share a couple of slides with you just in closing here that I use, and this will be in the deck that I share on that blog. So a lot of you are working off these now. We've shared these a couple times, the different content. But basically the capabilities map of ServiceNow. And if you come at this from a governance perspective, all the stuff circled in number 1 is owned by the platform team. So we try to really assign the ownership as part of the model. So number 2 could be an IT service management area. We might group ITOM together with ITAM to make all of that area as one program. App portfolio management is its own, right? App Engine might have its own area. So this is, depending on what you own, you're going to have different areas of ownership. And this is what I've been really driving a lot with product management, is how are we grouping these things together so that we can say, Jill owns that, Jenny owns this. So if you take all that and you draw it on the map, on the capability map, then you go down and now you could start to say, what is the team that takes care of this? So this is a lot of what Brad talked about earlier, the structure of the team. There's an executive sponsor. And if you drill down in the deck, there's a role responsibility definition for that executive sponsor. So everybody has their own parts. This middle layer to me is the most important, what I've been driving a lot. Some of you called them solution area owners. Some of you call them service owners. I call them product managers. So there's actually Jill Smith owns the IT service management product. And here, if you go down, it'll be the whole roadmap. So there's all different types of things that can go on here. Like in some states I have where Jill would actually be providing IT service management as a service to other agencies. And so that could be all different types of things, and the role could be all different types of sizes depending on what Jill is actually doing. Down the bottom, we have the role descriptions for the platform team. Right? But the idea here is that you really want to set this up so that that platform product manager, I got bingo here, right? That platform product manager serves all of the tenants on the platform. So these are all tenants on the platform. To the left are IT tenants, to the right are non-IT tenants. And then those tenants are who the platform product manager, product owner, whoever you're calling them, they should never be making a case for procurement. There should be somebody else making that case for the procurement product and somebody else asking to host it on the platform. And bingo should be helping that person do that, but they should not be the one that gets all the demand for all of the new things that run on the platform. One other thing here is that if you're working on this and you're the IT asset manager, Mike Lee, you're not the product manager for ServiceNow. You're product manager for the entire asset program. right? So ServiceNow is part of it, but you're not doing asset management with just ServiceNow. You're using SCCM, you're using Jamf, you're using all this data, all these other connectors. So Mike Lee's responsible for the whole asset management program, not just to say that, hey, I got the ServiceNow parts done. Now, the middle layer is really where you want to have that strategy decided with the top layer. So and this is aligning the products on the capability map to the people. And then what we have here is the same thing Brad mentioned earlier, right? The executive steering board, right? Which is largely those top two lines. And then you have the demand board, which is mostly going to be the middle line, right? All the people that own the different ServiceNow product areas are on this demand board. And then you have the technical governance board, which are usually going to be the bottom two lines, right? The people that have active things going on and are meeting regularly to talk about those things. So this is a framework we're giving you, right? So nobody does it exactly the same. Pretty evident on the chat that we had earlier, right? Everybody's doing this a little different. So these are guidelines. We come in as architect, we help you shape this for your organization. So the last thing, besides saying, hey, these are all the things you own ServiceNow capability-wise, and that's area 1 versus area 2, there's also going to be the different ways that we can stage the roadmaps. So that App Engine product owner or product manager, whatever you're calling them, they would be able to now look at the ServiceNow capabilities and stage those in depending on how they would need them. So this, again, this should not be the ServiceNow platform owner who does these roadmaps. Roadmaps at this level should be done by those solution area product owners. It may be the same person, but make sure, as Brad said before, you're changing that hat when you start talking about an App Engine specific roadmap. You're no longer the ServiceNow platform owner, but you're now the product owner of the App Engine product. Okay, so those slides will be in there. That's the way, for those of you that worked with me on engagements, this is the way that I go about it. And we tweak this for everybody, right? It never works the same way. But that's basically the slides that I use for that governance section. And we always make sure, because it's really more important than the products, right? The ServiceNow products can get you part of the way there, but if you don't have the right butts and seats, as I call it, right, you're not going to be able to get the work you need done in these areas to maximize your value. Okay, so I dropped these links in there too, so that the links Brad was showing, these are links on our Success Center, the team estimator, and also the document that explains the role. All right, a lot of words real quick. So Brad, thank you very much for coming on and going through that. Very thorough. I picked up a lot of things myself that I'm going to steal from you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm passionate about this stuff.
Good deal. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you in a few weeks.